Hi there, I'm Tommy Larkin, and welcome to the Tweak of the Week. All right, welcome back, and thank you for joining me today. So, the studio is in a bit of a disarray at the moment due to some work we've been having to have done here at the house. And so I'm giving you a new view from the studio for today. But it's just a conversation today about the Tweak of the Week, which is about the foundation of the body in our poses. And that foundation is your hips. And it's very straightforward and simple. The feet are your anchors in the pose. Whether the feet are on the ground or the feet are in space, it does not matter. They are the anchor. They keep you essentially connected with the floor. And you may be thinking, well, but what about handstand? My hands are on the floor. My experience is, yes, your hands are your anchor into the floor, but that's just the contact point. If the feet don't know where they are in space, you're not going to be able to be balanced in a handstand or headstand or pinch my rasa or any place that the feet are not on the ground, essentially, and you are upside down. But that brings us back to what the foundation of the poses are. And that foundation is your hips. If the hips don't know where they are in space, it doesn't matter how much strength you have, how well you can balance, how open the inner thighs may be, for instance, saying like tree or something like that, or a standing pose. It doesn't matter. If the hips aren't in a neutral position as best they can be to the what we deem would be the quote-unquote ideal position of a pose, right? Now, of course, on a side note, as you may know from me, ideal does not mean that's what your pose will look like potentially. It's just a picture of where we may be moving towards, right? And once you get to those ideals of concepts of a pose, there's usually a space beyond that or other variations of which to grow in that pose to a new quote-unquote ideal position. So they're just benchmarks, just destinations on the journey that we're making. But important to understand is those hips. And that means that the hip points, those two bony points on the front of your hips, those are the points I like to work from. They want to learn how to be parallel to the ground and parallel to the front of your mat, or maybe the front of the pose. So Warrior One's a good example, right? Virabhadrasana Eka is that when you're in the position, unless you shorten the stance, if you work in that traditional position I like to teach from, which is a full lunging position with the back heel down, you're not going to be able to have the hips parallel to the front of the mat. But they do need to be parallel to the floor. So they may be turned because of the extension of the legs, but you still find parallel to the ground, which would be the first place that you're looking to find the hips in Warrior One. Second would be the rotation to parallel, or as close to parallel as you can get. In Warrior Two, it's likewise. With the legs to that same distance, which is the sort of ideal position to help your body grow efficiently and appropriately, then you're wanting to find that parallel of the hips to the floor. Then as much parallel to the side of your mat as possible, right? Now, we look at tree. I actually teach you want to have the hips parallel to the front of the mat first, then work on finding that parallel to the floor. And the reason I say that is because I've found for myself that as I've grown deeper in tree over the many, many years that I've done tree, and when I first started not being able to get my foot above my knee, is that once you get past a certain point, the hip tends to kick up naturally due to the lack of ability to fully give more external rotation in the lifted leg thigh. And each side obviously is different. But as that foot gets higher and the rotation becomes a little more restricted as you begin to grow the pose more, getting parallel to the front of the mat gives you that benchmark that it's like, okay, now I'm parallel. Now, how do I find to lengthen one side, contract another, and get those hips more parallel to the floor, which then allows you to grow in the pose. So let's look then at handstand really quickly. If you're on your hands and you're up in space, the hips need to know where they are, because the feet being the anchor to the pose, right? Not the hands. The hands are your, we'll call it the secondary foundation. It's just what's supporting you. We'll call it actually the support structure. Then is to put the hips in a position where they need to be so that the legs understand where they need to go to create the balance or the lift or the extension. Now let's combine a couple of those things and go back and look at, say, crescent pose, where both feet are pointing forward, the back heel's lifted, the arms and the chest are reached up into the sky, and you're in that whatever back bending effect you have for your pose. So when you learn where those hips are parallel to the front of the mat and parallel to the floor, which is pretty easy in crescent pose to create, then you could take that into handstand and decide you want to split the legs, assuming you have balance in handstand and are proficient enough in it, that you can bend one leg and put it into a bent knee, and the other leg extending straight out, which is just crescent pose upside down. Now, since you have proficiency in crescent pose standing upright on the feet, your hips, and as a result, the legs, and technically the torso and arms, all have an understanding of the work that needs to be done. So when you flip it over and you're working on it upside down, the hips are that foundation that teach you where the other parts of the body need to be, because it is the most solid, full, and foundational structure in the body that is steady in almost every pose that we work in. Well, actually, every pose we work in, regardless of whether it's a twist, a standing pose, an inversion, an arm balance, the hips are always going to be solid, strong, and stationary. Right? So, in a minute, I will clip in here one quick thing you can do at the wall to kind of have an understanding in your own body, whether you are a little bit skewed, meaning that one hip wants to naturally kick forward more, and how parallel, which you'll need a mirror for that to do most efficiently, okay? That will give you an idea of where you may need to work just in Tadasana to find better alignment of the hips to the floor and the front of your mat. So, to focus on this, I'm showing you basically, from mid down, so you can really see the legs and the hips against the wall. Now, the first important thing is, and I'm gonna exaggerate here, is a lot of people come in and stand with their feet in what they feel is their comfortable position. All right, mine is actually more kind of like this. This is my sort of natural position. I even have to work on doing what I teach you to, which is keep the feet parallel to each other. So if you're barefooted, you can move the center of the ankle to the base of the second toe. That's generally a good line to work with. And in your shoes, you can probably see where the center line of the feet are. Okay, so get those feet parallel to each other, about hip distance apart is fine, and the heels against the wall. Then on your hips and the back of your body against the wall. And if you need to scooch the feet forward a little bit for comfort or balance, that's perfectly fine. Okay, just maybe put a block between the wall and your feet, and that'd be okay too. But as you stand against the wall and you lean your head back to be against the wall, take these front ribs and pull them in towards the hips. And then as you straighten the legs, feel if one side of your hip is coming away from the wall. So I'll kind of try to exaggerate that. That kind of looks like this. So my right hip is kicking forward and my left hip is back, and I'm exaggerating. You're going to feel what will be balance in your feet, your heels against the wall, and then you'll feel which side of your glutes, your buttocks, are touching the wall more firmly. Right? Now I can tell you that my left touches a little bit more, and as I've already mentioned, my right hip kicks forward a little bit, and I could already feel that in my right foot. Right? I can feel that it wants to be forward more. Right? It's kind of almost like it's slid forward in my sneaker there. Okay? So that's the way to feel that. Now the other side is to feel the hip points, right? The two bones at the top of the ilium, which is the bones of the hips, are they even to the floor? Now, the easiest way to feel this is actually to get a mirror in front of you and see, put your thumbs or your fingers on those points, and see if those are parallel to each other. Now, I cannot see to my monitor, as I said. I've got a disarray here, so everything's in a little bit of a wrong spot. But it looks as though my hips are pretty much even and parallel to the floor. And this is what we're seeking. So there you go. I hope you gained great benefit from today's work. If you have any questions about this tweak or any previous one, let me know. Put your question in the comments of the specific tweak and I'll get back to you. Also, if you like today's tweak, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Plus, check out the website and follow us on social media for other inspiration and great ways to increase your optimal vitality. You'll find those links in the description below. As always, thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, have an amazing week and be excellent to each other.